This is The View from Where We Live. The View from Where We Live, where we'll take a look at the stories of our time.
Welcome. This is the first broadcast of The View from Where We Live. I'm your host, Mary Eckert, and this program is intended to promote the understanding of issues we face in 2012 and in the future, and how knowing one another better will make living and working in this community better. Today, we're opening with a discussion of language and how to get your message across. And my first guest and I collectively came up with the name, The View from Where We Live. We're launching this program with my guest, Brad Fleming, the creative director of Dynamic Incorporated, and Dale Canuck. He is a full-time artist, he used to be a freelance illustrator and a mural painter, but now both of these men are working in the community as artists, and Brad's a creative director. And I worked for them at SVA, Sheboygan Visual Artists, for a time. So Brad, I'm going to have you start right off and describe the meeting where we came up with the name, The View from Where We Live.
All right. Well, it was about a little more than a year ago, and I think we were planning for a show that we were going to have in March. And we had Dale was in the show, as well as Rita.
Harmeling.
Yep. And we all kind of knew that what we were looking for that common theme. And my painting is much different than Dale's, who's much different than Rita's, and so we were looking for that common thread. And
they were all focused on Sheboygan.
And they were all focused on Sheboygan. So I think I may have said, well, I just paint what I see. This is the view from where I live. And I think you took it from there.
And I said, that's it.
That's it. 3
perspectives.
Yep.
The view from where we live. Okay, the view ties in with the TV show here today, ties in with an artist's view as an example of language, how we communicate. Who wants to take the first question? How do we communicate? I would venture that art, what we're seeing here, is probably a foreign language to a lot of people. They probably don't want to run over to an art show. They're a little hesitant. Just makes me think of my past. You'd see people in an art museum and they say, what are they whispering about? And, oh, they must be really smart. But describe, what does a person look for?
I'm going to let Dale take this one first.
Okay.
Well, I think some people are intimidated by going to an art exhibit or whatever, but I also think anybody can get something out of a painting if they can relate to it, if it stirs up an emotion in them, or they can, there's something they have in common with that painting. It might even be just a color that triggers an emotion out of them.
Something from their past triggers?
In my case, I do representational paintings, so I try to, I try to relate to other people's lives in that respect. But
so you're trying to evoke.
Possibly.
We talked about you paint alleys is a big theme for you.
Right.
How did that come about? How did you start doing that?
Just riding to work on a bicycle and
what
started
did
going
you
through
find
the
out?
alleys.
I know.
And I started going through the alleys, and it kind of took me back to the days when I was growing up and playing in alleys. And
what did you see back there that you put in your paintings that you wanted us to see?
Well, I think the one thing was the other side of people's lives,
front doors,
and houses,
the backyard.
Because they might have a beautiful front yard, and you might be going through the alley and seeing a pile of junk laying next to the garage. But besides that, it's just all the wires and it's just a different view from going down the street. So I was really attracted to the other side of the.
What kind of comments do you get from people when they see your alley series? What's the most common thing that all of them say?
Most people think it's an interesting point of view. So.
Brad,
Yes.
how do you use language? How do you speak in your paintings?
Well, as you can see, Dale and I have different styles, and I think I paint a lot faster, and my painting.
What's the message you want to get across?
The message I'm trying to get across is basically what I'm feeling at a given moment. I live near the lake, and every day, but certainly every morning, it looks completely different. And it stirs up such an emotion inside of me. I've always lived on Lake Michigan, either in Michigan or in Wisconsin, and there's just something about it that I can look at that horizon every single day and feel differently every day. And so I paint very fast so that I try not to overthink things. I try to just let it all come out onto the canvas. And so I'm not near the craftsman that Dale is. But I think I love what Dale does. But it's like the name of the show. It's just different perspectives from where we live.
Right. You are so fascinated by the lake. There are a lot of people in Sheboygan that are. How do you think Sheboygan stacks up with other places you've lived? You mentioned this before.
As a community, I think Sheboygan's a kind of an amazing place, and
How long have you lived here now?
I've lived here about 10 years.
10 years. Okay.
Yeah. It's a wonderful community, and it's sort of is like this little hidden gem.
Is it a microcosm of anything? What's a hidden gem?
A hidden gem sitting right out in the middle of, every place. I mean, it's just people drive by it on the way up to Door County or whatever.
What shines? What's
Well,
the
to me,
gem part?
the lake shines. Obviously, the beaches shine. The culture here, the arts, the entertainment is actually pretty good for a community this size. And life is simple here, and that's what I really like about it. But yeah, it's the lake that keeps drawing me.
When you're getting a message across, I always think of interpreting and translating one's message from the language you use to the language that your audience uses, whether it's a gallery goer or a listener or a viewer. How do you translate?
I think people get way too kind of uptight and worrying about what they think they're supposed to see, as opposed to just allowing themselves to just see it and appreciate it. And it's okay if you judge it one way or the other, but to not worry about it too much. And I think that's what makes it intimidating, just like tasting wine. You think you're supposed to know something that only a few people know, and that's not really the case at all. If you like it, then you like it. It doesn't matter if it was painted by a master or
what kind of conversations do you get into with people who come to SVA, Sheboygan Visual Artist shows?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to encourage as many people to join SVA, or more importantly, I should say, just try to create their own expression of themselves. So whether it's writing a book, writing a poem, painting a painting, writing a song, it doesn't really matter. And I think so many people, like myself included, used to worry so much about what other people thought about it, about what I was trying to do, that I didn't do anything for the longest time. And I've only started painting within the last 5 years.
Describe that process, the jump you
well, I mean,
you've
for
made.
me, it all happened after my mother who passed away, who was a painter, and I don't know, I was afraid to paint. I didn't want to be compared with her. I didn't want to be compared with anybody else. I was a graphic designer. And a photographer. It was a lot easier. And finally, I couldn't get done what I wanted to get done. And
What do you mean by that?
I couldn't communicate.
Other stuff or painting?
Painting. And that's the other thing too. I think, when you communicate or create for a living, having your own personal outlet is incredibly important. And I think maybe that was the other thing. I was a frustrated artist. I couldn't find another venue to communicate until I really started putting stuff on canvas.
And what kind of training did you have to be an artist? A creative director does a different job than painting.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Bachelor of Science in Fine Arts from Valparaiso University in Indiana. So I took all of the fine arts classes. I focused more on photography and graphic design, primarily for the career standpoint. I've done a fair amount of throwing pots and working with clay and that kind of stuff, and I really love doing that. But the painting, I think that I had to overcome this whole. I was afraid to put something on canvas because it just seemed so permanent, and that's probably also why I work so fast. I stopped thinking about what I'm doing and I just do it.
This is a little off the topic, but I know career-wise, you didn't start where you're at now. That you learned a different kind of career and then jumped into more electronic stuff because you didn't want to be worked out of your career or left behind in your because I think there are so many people, you're not as old as I am, but people that need to understand how an iPad works or how to use the technology.
Yeah, I think you just have to you have to not be afraid to continually learn. I started when I started my career, we did things with big drawing boards and layout pads and all of that kind of stuff, and markers, and now everything is done on the computer, and so you have to make that transition. Doing print advertising and brochures and whatnot is one thing, but doing an e-commerce website is quite another. And
how do you think the message gets across in what medium today?
Well, first you have to.
It's not the drawing boards and the crayons and the markers. There aren't even the usual.
Well, I think it's all. First, there has to be a message. You have to have something to say. You have to know what you want to say. How you say it today just happens to be a little bit different. We don't use smoke signals too often anymore, and so but it's still communication. You still have to know what you want to say. What's nice about what I'm trying to do with my painting is I'm actually spending less time worrying about what I'm really trying to communicate. This is about as raw emotion as I can put out there. So I'm trying to be as unfiltered as I can be.
And are you more in the category of I paint for myself, I don't care what the viewer,
Totally.
I don't care what the viewer gets out of it. It's my self-expression going on.
And that was a hard thing for me to come to grips with. I have another friend who lives in Wisconsin, and his work is in some galleries down in Chicago, and he I asked him one time, what if you don't sell this? He said, I don't care if I sell this. I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else but me. And being somebody who gets paid to create things, that was kind of a watershed moment for me. But once I heard that, I thought, okay, I can try to do that myself.
Yeah. Well, Dale, you said that you respond, your emotional expression, emotions drive you to paint more than, do you want to go into the emotional part of it?
Well,
what
it's like Brad's,
how do you pick a site? How do you say, oh, that's the picture? I know when I took pictures with a camera, I said, ooh, that's a picture. How do you know that's a picture?
That's a good question. Actually, I'm not sure. I mean, it's something I respond to.
Composition.
Composition's a big part of it, but if I respond to it, not as a composition, but if it kind of tells me, paint
me,
Yeah.
paint me, right?
And it sounds probably cliche and a little
Say it.
weird, but that's kind of how it works. I mean,
Did you take a photograph of that and paint it from a photograph? Or
That, yes. Right.
sit there, it's called plein air when you are
that's
there?
not plein air,
That's
no.
not plein air, okay.
Although I do plein air painting, but generally that's more out in nature, landscapes. I can very well sit in the middle of a street and set up a easel, so.
Okay, now Brad and Dale are going to tell us a little bit about their paintings. And Brad, you're going to go first.
Okay. This painting over here is called a Snow Moon, and that, which really probably makes no sense to anybody, but things happen out over the Lake Michigan, especially on a full moon night. This one, I try to align them with whatever full moon and month that the image was taken. And sometimes I do actually take photographs, and other times I don't. But there's just amazing things that happen with the play between the light from the moon, the ambient light that's still left in the sky, what happens with the surface of the water, and depending on the weather, whether there's been a storm or whatever,
These are all things that enter into it for you.
all things enter into it. There's just that sky will look, and that whole scene will look different every single day. And we've had an amazing sunrise this morning. But that painting was a night shot, which I don't really normally do. And it was cold, and I don't know what else to tell you other than it's.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hurricane Sandy just happened
Yep.
a day or two ago,
Yep.
and brought big waves
Yep.
to Sheboygan. From Hurricane Sandy was on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get down there? What did
Oh yeah, took lots of photographs, and I don't know what the
paintings coming?
probably paintings coming. There was some amazing things that was happening with the clouds that were probably over Michigan, but there were the blues that were coming up off of the horizon, and just sort of faded into. It was amazing, and it was something that we don't always see around here. And the way the waves have been crashing, more than a mile out, and huge rollers coming in. It was great to see all the people out there with their cameras photographing it from different angles. So there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that comes out of this.
How do you know a mile out? I've been looking at that lake for a long time. I wouldn't even
Well, I'm also a kayaker, and I've paddled out past the buoy, and I know
So
how
that's
far.
another perspective.
Yeah, and so, yeah, you just get to.
So all these elements enter into your creativity, and you are the owner of the greatest creativity quote I know.
Uh-oh.
You told me you were going to say it. 6th grade.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Somebody who is much wiser than me. I went to hear him talk, and he talked about how every person is a creative genius, but by the time we are in 6th grade, we have it taught out of us, and
That's not what you said. Taught out of us.
Beaten out of us, beat, taught, whatever. I mean, but the point is that as we get older and we become more and more institutionalized or whatever, and we're told who's creative and who isn't creative, and we start to feel that stigma that if I'm creative, then and not athletic or not mathematically smart or whatever, then were of lesser value. And so he told some stories about how by the time he would teach these classes starting in kindergarten and asking kids who was a painter, who was creative, and every kid would raise their hand in kindergarten. And by the time they got to 3rd and 4th grade, only a couple would raise their hand, and then by the time they got to 6th grade, nobody would raise their hand. And that's a really sad thing in today's world, that because it's becoming a creative economy out there, and
rise of the creative class.
Yeah, we'll make things other places, but and we still make things here, but you still have to have those ideas of things to make. So, yeah.
What's the best thing for stimulating a good idea?
Oh,
Did I open up
extra dark coffee for me. A walk. I mean, for me, it's a lot of times it has to do with being outside and a walk and just letting it happen. I find that when I go looking for something, I usually don't find it, but when I just sit back and let it happen,
and when you're really looking for a number of things, nothing happens, and when you just want to relax,
exactly,
they all happen, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Dale, Brad's work is impressionistic because it's done quickly. Yours is more representational, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And how do you take time to...
Well, what's interesting is when I see Brad's work, I am trying to get to that point. I'm trying to simplify how I work and...
do it for yourself rather than make a perfect picture?
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to be less representational and more... I want to simplify the image and, more expressionistic and impressionistic. So, and you would think that'd be easy to do, but it's
You're trying
one
to
of the
make
most
the
difficult
jump
things I've tried to do since I've been an artist, really.
Okay. How would you make that more impressionistic?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know exactly, but I'm working on it. It's like I've gotten to a certain point where I need to not necessarily reinvent myself, but I want to explore some different things. And one of the things I want to do is simplify my images, my paintings.
Okay.
So, and I can't believe how difficult it is, really. It's hard to...
It's hard to do. Can you give us, each of you give us an example of artistic growth you've experienced recently? Dale, you said?
Well, I recently began teaching painting with a few. I have 3 people. We do it once a week. And I think that's been pretty interesting. I'm learning as much as they are, I would think, and I...
That's the way it works when you're a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, I think I'm growing from that.
Good. And Brad, you mentioned?
Well, most recently, I went over to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and went to Art Prize, which Dale actually was a competitor and a participant in.
Describe Dale's work.
Okay, well,
awesome.
Dale had this amazing painting of a street in their Heritage Hill neighborhood, which is this neighborhood just outside of downtown or connected to downtown Grand Rapids of these, I don't know if you call them mansions, but they're pretty big houses. But there was a photograph that he took in May or June of this year. And it was this amazing image of primarily of sunlight filtering through these, I don't know what kind of trees they were.
Some were sycamore.
It was a
perspective. It was similar to this, but it was just, and actually, but the impressive thing was
the size of it.
Yeah, it was 18 feet wide,
17 feet wide, 8 feet high.
8 feet high. I mean, it's huge.
Huge.
And you really felt like you were in the scene, which that part was really fun. But and obviously when you're painting to that scale, I would imagine all sorts of different things have to start taking shape.
Watching you paint that, I mean, first came the purples, and then I thought, how do you make the end come out of the beginning? It was just stunning to me. But we have to move on. What we've talked about today is essentially communicate yourself and find your voice by trying new things, right? So your SVA shows are really kind of a celebration of speaking out, even though they're visual. You speak out through that. So I'm coming up to the chance for your shameless plug.
Okay.
What's your next SVA show? When and where?
The next event is our annual holiday art sale, December 1st. At
Public invited.
Public invited. It's held at the EBCO Artworks building at 1201 Erie Ave. And it's December 1st from 10 in the morning till 9 at night, and then December 2nd, and then the next 2 weekends after that from 10 until 4.
Okay. I think we have a little bit of time left. We're going to just give the inaugural round a couple questions from the top 10 lightning round to get a glimpse of where you live, and you live up here. So I'm going to just pick out some of these questions, and we don't have time for all of them. I'll start with Brad. How many hours a week do you spend working?
Working?
Yeah, you're supposed to fire back.
On my painting?
Working, period.
60 plus.
60 plus, okay. What do you find the most satisfaction in?
Painting.
Think about these. Describe the farthest or most memorable travel experience you've had.
Most memorable and most recent was I delivered my son to Santa Fe, where he started a new job this summer, and my brother and I took a road trip out there and back, and that was an amazing trip.
Really quick.
Yes.
What's the best advice you've ever received and ever given? And then you're done.
Ask what if.
Ask what if. That's the best you've received and the best you've given.
I
do the same.
Absolutely.
Okay. Dale?
Yes.
How many hours a week do you spend working?
60.
We're copying. What do you find the most satisfaction in?
Doing what I do right now, being an artist.
Okay. What's the best advice you've ever received and given? Pass?
Pass.
Okay, then I'm going to jump to what would you ever have been if you hadn't been an artist? Christopher Plummer.
Entomologist.
Entomologist. Okay, we'll go with that.
I like bugs.
Bugs, yeah. And what are you going to do when you leave here, the studio?
Today?
Yeah.
I go to my studio.
And what will you do in your studio?
I will work.
Paint?
Yes.
Paint, okay. Brad, what are you going to do when you leave?
I'm going to go back to my office and work and prepare for my in-laws who are visiting this weekend.
And today's the Thursday that we're taping. And I hope you both have a great weekend. Anything else you want to get in here before we wrap it up?
No, this has been a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. I think it has been fun. I would like to invite you back to talk more sometime. I thank you for spending time with us today. My guests have been artist Brad Fleming, the creative director for Dynamic, and artist as a full-time artist in the community, Dale Canuck. And I am your host, Mary Eckert, and I hope we've enhanced the view from where you live.